to Paddlecast with Betsy
and Billy. On Paddlecast, we talk to and about paddlers who are pushing the limits, paddlers who are pushing their own limits and pushing the limits of paddle sports.
We have the honor and excitement today of interviewing Tom Sharp and Anoushka Freeman, who just won the Devizes to Westminster race 2025. And this is their second win 2 years in a row. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to Paddlecast, Tom and Noushie.
Thanks for having us.
I was very close to your race, although I was an hour up the river, but I've looked back on it with the tracker information, and it looked like you went pretty hard in the first half of the race. I wondered whether this was so that you had a little bit in hand on the others on the lower half of the course, but was that the case?
I think we set our schedule sort of irrespective of anyone else. So it was really about executing our own race. Broadly, we were kind of entirely on schedule the whole way to Reading. So I don't think we did anything differently because we were chasing people down. Although it was definitely pleasing to hear that things were going well in that regard.
Yeah, thanks, Billy. You know, we set off behind you, and I always like to do that. We didn't deliberately go hard, to be honest. We set our own schedule as we always do. We made sure we were far enough away from all the other boats paddling. But actually, the first bit felt really good. So we probably went a bit faster than I thought we were going. And even though there was a headwind, we went a bit faster than last year. And, you know, our crew actually, our support crew said a couple of times, look, you know, you don't need to be going that fast. I mean, and making sure that we weren't trying too hard. And I particularly thought, I'm feeling good here. And I knew Noushie was too, because we said a couple of times that this is all easy, this bit. So we were well aware that it was supposed to be easy, but we were still moving along pretty well. So no great heroics planned there. We didn't deliberately get ahead on Joe and Andy or Andy and Tom. It just kind of happened.
It was more of a note about last year. I think in your post-race interview, you said you kept a bit back on the canal because you knew how hard the Thames would be. And I wondered whether it was this year, whether you knew that the Thames would be easier and you thought, well, we could just take a little bit more to Reading this year.
Yeah, I mean, so when I made that comment, it was more about after Aldermaston last year, when you start getting a bit of flow come in, and we were already going so much faster than our plan. So at that point, I was like, okay, we can really relax about how fast and how hard we're going. Because I was thinking then, the Thames is going to be challenging, you know, so in terms of just being able to make use of all the flow. So I was like, we've got to make sure we're absolutely ready for that, which is why it was fine to just ease off a little bit after the Aldermaston section. But this year it was all flat, you know, it was all like easy water. So we could probably pace it a bit more evenly in terms of our effort and not need to hold anything back. So I guess maybe there was something in that. But, you know, particularly up to Newbury, we went pretty much the same plan that we had last year. There was not a lot different at all.
I think also for better or for worse later down the race, who knows? But I felt a lot more comfortable this year early on. Don't know if I was more nervous last year or we had a bit more of a lean last year when we were training. But there was definitely like a good few hours last year where I was thinking this could be quite a long night. I'm not that comfortable. Whereas we kind of got in the boat at Devizes and felt pretty good straight away. So felt kind of more naturally inclined to start paddling well straight away.
You had the luxury of going last, so you could have had time splits on all the crews down the course. From looking at your support crew, I would be surprised if you didn't. But where did you start getting updates on the other boats?
The first one was much earlier than I thought it would even be. It was at kind of one of the bridges, even before Pewsey Wharf. Somewhat unsolicited, to be honest. We were getting splits from people who weren't even on our support crew, which was nice to hear. But also, I guess lucky that we wanted them. Tom said before we started, any splits we get are information. That's all they are. They're not going to change how we race. And I don't think they did, but they were pleasing.
Yeah, I was really keen to get as much information as we could. What you do with it, not a lot really. But it was interesting to hear afterwards, chatting to Joe, that he deliberately didn't want that much information unless it was like really close. And to be honest, I don't know why he wouldn't. I prefer to know all of that and be able to process it myself rather than have the big unknown and just have to stress about it.
On the flip side, I don't think last year we got, well, I guess partly because we set off so much before everyone else, but we definitely didn't get splits for quite a long time last year. Neither of us knew we were in about 6th at Pusey. And I think only really started getting splits last year when things started going well for us. So it was like later down the canal when people started saying like, oh, you're closing a gap. Well, I didn't know there was a gap, don't know how big the gap is, but closing it sounds good.
I was going to ask about the decision to go last this year compared to going so much earlier last year. What were the factors that went into that choice?
That was a fairly intense, that was a fairly interesting negotiation and conversation. I think, I guess remind everyone the top 3 boats, if I can call them that, in terms of on paper before the race. So us, Joe and Brindy, Andy and Tom, 4 out of the 6 of us paddle together every day, right? So, we do a lot of talking about how we're going to do the race, but again, keeping our own stuff, our own information to us. But we all knew, I think, that we were going to be aiming for pretty much the same sort of time. And we were sort of getting a bit cagey about who's going to go when, all this sort of stuff. And I think independently, we all realised we didn't want to leave it until we got to Devizes and then, have that traditional game of cat and mouse or whatever you call it. Because it would probably mean we all ended up going like within a minute or two of each other. And that's not what any of us wanted. We all wanted to paddle our own race, start alone, have a decent gap. So the idea was pretty, universally accepted that we wanted to spread ourselves out a bit. And we had all sorts of combinations. I think Joe put his cards down early on saying he wanted to go second. There was a plan already hatched with him and Tom, I believe, that, or Andy, sorry, that Noushie and I were going to go first. But then, things changed. So, yeah, we came to an agreement, and obviously that was that Andy and Tom were going to go first, and then a short gap later it was Joe and Brindy, and then we would set up last. Personally, I quite liked the idea of going last because you get maximum information, and obviously that was, I was quite keen on that. So that's how we ended up where we were. And in the end, something I said to Noushie as we were talking about this during the whole negotiation, we had already overthought the process and the importance of when everyone goes, because, the maximum anyone was going to be separated by was 10 or 15 minutes. And you can kind of expect, or at least we did, that by the end of the race, something along the way would have happened that meant no one was sort of that close anymore. Obviously, it turned out slightly differently. We were that close. But the start order shouldn't have made a difference to the result. I don't think it did. But it was quite a fun process to go through anyway.
I think part of the rationale behind the order ultimately was after Woodside D, we were all keen not to start together. I think we found it less beneficial than perhaps we'd expected going in, and thought like Tom and I were probably the slowest boat on kind of raw speed and possibly weren't going to be the fastest in the first few hours. Turned out differently to be expected, but so it was almost like a reverse speed order where we could then all have some confidence, well, especially us because we were last, but that you wouldn't get caught, and so you'd be racing your own race.
I remember getting an update on you. Must have been, well, wherever we were 8 minutes down on you, and obviously we're an hour ahead, so we're quite a long way. This was probably at Reading, and we probably got that at Marlow. So, and I remember thinking, wow, 8 minutes, that's, and they started slower last year, and this year they've started faster. And in my mind, I just thought that's a good crew there. But at some point after that, you had some issues. Do you want to talk us through those issues?
I think coming into Reading, I had a bit of a sore stomach. I think Tom may have too. Feel like we both eased off the food a bit, and unsurprisingly, within a few hours, sort of energy levels took a dip too. We were definitely ploughing on okay, but last year, like reflectively last year, everything went so perfectly to plan, and there was definitely kind of more hurdles to face this year in that regard. So stomach was pretty sore, wasn't really taking on as much food as I wanted, and then possibly just got both of us like a bit clumsy, a bit less kind of smooth on portages. Had a bit of a spectacular time at Marlow with a little dip in the river, which only cost us I think about 4 minutes. We did a 9-minute split on that kilometer. But to me, that was a real wake-up call. Like, we're making mistakes here. We need to kind of focus down again. And actually from then, I think we almost, to me, certainly, I felt a bit better from there. I think it was almost what I needed to get my head back in gear. So I wouldn't say we were ever sort of disastrous in any way, but it definitely felt like we got a bit sloppier in that kind of Reading to Marlow period.
Yeah, I agree. We had a bit of a dip in that sort of middle section. I may have been, having felt so good up to Newbury, that it was inevitable that we would do that. Something I remember from last year was not really getting any of that. It was just solid the whole way. And starting this year, we felt really good. Then the sort of after the kit change, we started feeling a bit uncomfortable stomach wise. We both sort of got that at the same time, which I guess was not ideal, because it meant there was neither of us were feeling good at one time. And yeah, the swim at Marlow was a bit of a nuisance. It was my mistake. I pushed off but didn't push off far enough. Started to paddle and my paddle clipped the pontoon. And when you're 120 kilometers in, reaction time isn't quite the same as it was at the beginning. So we ended up in the water before I knew it. Fortunately, we were right there, having just got into the portage, so we didn't have far to swim to get back and empty out and get going again. But it was just that was Marlow, Billy. So we had heard that we were 8 minutes ahead of your time to get there, I think, and 6 minutes ahead of. No, we heard actually we were 6 minutes ahead of your time, and 9 minutes of Joe and Brindy to get there. It's all about the same. But I remember getting back in, paddling away, thinking, right, our lead is pretty much gone to both of you guys. So we've got a bit of work to do here. And yeah, there was a bit of a moment of focus when we said, right, listen, if we're going to win this thing, we've actually got to get our head down and recover from that, and catch back up the lead that we should still have, but don't.
But by that same token, I don't think any of us ever really lost faith. Like, you kept saying, do you remember, we're actually still the leaders here. And I sort of had this belief that if we were able to put in a gap before, we can do it again. But we're going to have to dig pretty deep. And we did. But I think it was that mentality that, gets you out of that kind of thing. We were obviously making mistakes. We made a mistake. We were very, very tired. But we thought it would still be possible, and definitely was worth a try.
And I think it's times like that looking back, and it was obvious at the time, really, but the fact that the two of us in the boat felt so comfortable, we've done so much together already, and the fact that we've both done the race for the last 2 years in a row, like, it was an uncomfortable situation, but it was not new. We knew what we had done before, and yeah, maybe it was a bit more challenging than past couple of races, but I think a key benefit that we had, which probably saw us through that phase, was it wasn't the first time really that we've been anywhere near that sort of uncomfortable situation. The experience I think that we had versus some of the other crews really came through there, and I reckon that could well have been something that helped us out until we started feeling better.
But definitely will give credit to the other crews in that I think we dug really deep to pull a lead back out and to pick up what we'd lost. We probably wouldn't have done that if there wasn't other crews pushing us, and there was really incredible competition this year. So
you weren't leading at Teddington, so you had to dig it out later. But my impression of you had these issues and you kept it together and pulled through. It's going to sound bad, but it just shows how good a crew you are and how well prepared you've been for both of these races. You've done 250 miles of DW paddling together and the 2,000 kilometers of training, and that shows. It's amazing, and it shows other people what needs to be done. You've set a precedent there.
I think it is really important to stress, like Billy was saying, just how exceptional your performance is, because I think, Billy and I have talked a little bit about, okay, let's look at some of the other crews. Did anyone else really have a shot at winning it, right? Like, we are, there's a point where you lost the lead there. The final gaps were 4 minutes between 1 and 2, 4 minutes between 2 and 3. But then, you know, hearing from you all, you took a dip and lost 4 minutes in the middle of the race just from, you know, essentially like having some stomach issues, getting a bit clumsy and taking a swim, and you still pulled out the win. I think that really shows that it makes me wonder if the 4-minute gap that we saw on paper maybe was not quite as close as it would have been. But, you know, you all were working really hard from Teddington. Or
Yeah,
were
we
you?
were. I mean, we were working hard the whole way, that's for sure. And I think it was close. You know, a race over 17 hours more, tiny gaps like 4 minutes. That is nothing. That is absolutely nothing. And yeah, we took a swim. We recovered from that. That was our issue. You know, all the other crews that were in with a chance of winning, and there were a number of them, they would have had similar issues. You know, whether it was a swim, I don't know. I think I heard Joe saying he didn't swim, but Brindy did. You know, that's I don't know how they worked that out, but you know, everyone had their own issues, right? Of the last 3, you know, including this one, the 3 years I've done, this was the hardest race, and in fact, the hardest paddle, for sure. You know, it was the longest, of course, but it was a race the whole time. You know, the gap never got more than, well, we had 6 minutes to Billy, and I don't think it got much more than that to anybody else ever. So that sounds like quite a long time. You know, if you put your stopwatch on, you count 6 minutes, it feels like a long time. But over the course of 17 hours, it really is nothing. And that made it hard. And I knew it was going to be hard. I was worried going into this year because I knew it was going to be harder than the last 2 that I've done. But that makes me more proud to have won it, you know, to have beaten the other crews that were in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th place, all of them. You know, to come out on top of such a talented field. This is the best race that I've had of my last 3.
That's pretty cool to hear. I mean, you've had 3 incredibly impressive races. Noushie, how did this year compare to? Oh, you've done 3 in a row as well. 2 with Tom, 2 wins.
Yes, this year was definitely incomparably harder. I think perhaps naively, when we were in Devizes, I thought it would be sort of the same but longer as last year. The year before I'd done in like 18-hour 20, so I thought actually I kind of know this drill of doing quite a long DW, and last year felt pretty fresh when I came into the finish, so what's another couple hours? But for whatever reason, and I think in large part the competition that we had, it was a lot harder. But as Tom said, that does make the win all the more meaningful.
So you got to Teddington, an hour and 10 minutes after I did. We were told, you know, there's nothing in it. You can, you know, you push on for the win. You would have been told exactly what the time split was, I'm guessing. What did you say to each other? And, you know, how hard did you then push? You know, you went past your home club. Was that a big lift? Was there people out there supporting you? Tell us about the tideway, Noushie.
The time split we were given was a very grey area. I feel like I heard a series of different numbers. They were all sort of from minus a couple minutes to plus a couple minutes that basically told me you're in the ballpark. But yeah, I mean, even talking now, no one's really clear because people are taking splits from different places. So the gauge I got was just you're in a very close race and you need to get your head down. And I think we did that. But truthfully, paddling down the tideway, I was thinking, we're not going fast enough to win this race. I think we were leaving everything out there, and I think one thing that perhaps certainly set me apart from when I did it a couple of years ago was like we didn't stop. And it's so easy on the tideway to put your paddle down for a wave and then for the next wave and then for a few seconds after the wave, and you start hemorrhaging time. So we were pretty consistent to just kind of keep plowing on through, but I didn't feel like there was an immense amount of power or strength or fortitude going in, but really just kind of getting on with it. And I would also say the tideway was incredibly tame in terms of the waves. I think Tom and I had done a recce on the tideway, which was pretty bouncy. It was wind against flow in the same way that it was on race day, and even just that without the boats was pretty bouncy. So really credit to everyone, including Tom, who organized that kind of tideway safety Uber boat situation, because it was really, really well managed and made for a fairly smooth ride down, I would say.
I was really looking forward to the tideway section because it kind of feels like you're in the home straight, and you are, but people forget it's quite a long way actually. It's a big chunk. Obviously, the furthest you paddled for a long time without getting out, so that presents its own issues. But you're supposed to have the tide pushing down, plus a bit of flow, and everything just gets a bit more exciting because you start seeing bits of London you recognise, and it's getting really close. And yeah, we didn't know who was going to win at that point. I going to the race, I assumed by the time we get to Teddington, it'll be fairly clear who's going to win this race. But it wasn't, which made it more exciting even. I'm getting excited now talking about it. So we prepared really well for the tideway. As it turns out, we probably overdid it. We thought there'd be bigger waves. We thought there'd be more tide. The fact that we found it flat pretty much the whole way down was somewhat of an anticlimax, if I'm honest. But coming back to the race, we couldn't see our competition at all, and obviously you don't get updates when you're down there, so it was hard to know what was happening. 1 minute difference at Teddington, they could have been either way, we don't know, but it was within a minute. And I mean, obviously it was a 4-minute gap in the end, which still isn't much, but that was all done on the tideway. I didn't know if we were going fast enough. I feared we weren't, like Noushie said. But then we started catching boats up, and we were flying past them. And I remember catching up with one boat that I thought, I think I recognise them. And it turned out to be Andy and Tom. And we passed them in Hammersmith area. It was actually just outside the Monday stage race finish area, so opposite Fulham Football Club. And they were drifting. I'll be honest, I'm sure they won't mind me saying it, but they were drifting. They were barely paddling, and we went past them really fast. And actually from there, I was thinking, okay, we're doing pretty well here. We're just moving forwards. That was all I was concentrating on. It's just not stopping, just keeping progress. Doesn't matter how fast it is. Let's just get down. Because I could see other crews, pulling into the side, having a stretch, and you're not getting any closer to the finish by doing that. You're just losing big chunks of time. So that was all I was focused on, really. And I had been down lower than anybody else racing, during the preparation for the race. I was lucky enough to join a recce with the safety guys. I went all the way down to Westminster in a safety boat, twice actually, in sort of January, March time. So I knew exactly what I was expecting in terms of the bridges, the order, where you go, just the things that there to look out for. And maybe that helped a little bit. It was all so familiar. I didn't have to think about where I was going, what side to be on, which arch to take, when to turn right down the little channel into the final stretch. And maybe that made a difference. I don't know. But I always find it a fun part of the race, even though everything's hurting and all you want to do is stop. And it's terrifying not knowing what the outcome of the race is going to be. It's a key part of the event. And, as far as I've got any involvement in it, I'll be trying my best to make sure we always go down there.
Yeah, I think, Tom, your tideway experience definitely gave me the confidence. I feel like I remember making a joke as we got back in Teddington, being like, I've got Mr. Tideway in front of me. Like, it's going to be okay. There's definitely something to say in that. I'm notoriously useless in the waves, but felt really confident with Tom. I also forgot to mention, I had a bit of a Billy Butler eye situation from Reading. So I was asking Tom to tell me which bridges we were getting to. I think you didn't quite understand that I really couldn't see. So we're getting somewhat frustrated when I was like, is this Chiswick? No, it's Hammersmith. Okay. Again and again. But yeah, it was, as Billy will know, an interesting experience going down actually kind of my home stretch, not really being able to get much of a sighting. But I could see my watch because it was much nearer me. So I could see that we were making progress, but couldn't really see where I was.
I'll put you onto my goggle supplier.
I need some cooler looking goggles, Billy.
No, that's it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So it's very upsetting to hear how flat you said the tideway was, because a large amount of my plan was go early when there'd be less tide running on the tideway, flatter water, we'll be able to paddle, and it was sort of hinging on this wind against tide on the tideway, and an hour later the course being unpaddleable, and it didn't play out that way. Even on the live stream at the very end, I said in another hour this isn't going to be a very nice place to paddle. But you guys got down, so it was good. And what really made me happy was how ecstatic you looked walking up the steps. The fist bump was nice touch. I'm glad how much it meant to you.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know what it's like. We all do. You prepare for this thing for months, and it's no matter how you do it, how you finish, it's an achievement to get down there. To be able to win at all is amazing. To win in a field like we had this year, even better. And I loved it. It's going to be hard to beat the race this year, but for all the features it had. I can't think when we will get another highly competitive field. So to win in that environment was amazing, and it was frustrating not knowing when we crossed the line what the result was. So that was a bit of a delayed reaction, and being able to do it in the stability of your 2 feet on the steps was a luxury I didn't expect to have. So yeah, that's what you were seeing there.
It was a great moment. Well, you two have both set some impressive precedents when we look at the history of DW. So, Noushie, you are the first woman to win DW twice. How does that feel? And how will you be how would you like to see that evolve moving forward?
I think I said this in one of the earlier interviews. I think endurance sports are becoming more and more dominated is the wrong word because it's not quite there yet, but there's a bigger and bigger presence of women at the top end in endurance sports, and it's whether that would have been me or someone else, it's really cool to see that that's taking place on DW too.
Off the podcast earlier, I was begging Noushie to go and make a serious attempt at the ladies' record. I said, go and get the ladies' record and become the queen of DW.
I would love to have another go. Who knows? Maybe with Tom one day again. We have still got an unfinished business with a record, a mixed record that we were chasing after, but and also maybe with a woman. Yeah, so I would love to have another go. I guess when I first paired up with Tom 2 years ago now, really my heart was set on having a go at getting the record, and it's still tricky for me that 2 consecutive years haven't done the business in that regard, but I think ultimately Lizzie and Keith were absolutely formidable athletes and did the most amazing performance, and whoever, if ever, one day beats that record will likely be condition dependent, and so last year we sent it way too far the other way and didn't even get a chance to go to Westminster, and this year probably a bit too far on the slow side. So yeah, I would love to have a go at a mixed record and also at a women's record maybe, or at least a good women's paddle down, but I have committed to doing it with my boyfriend Rob next year. He's supported me 3 years running, and I think I owe it to him to have a fun adventure of our own on the Thames at Easter.
That's great.
Yeah. How does Rob feel about that? Has he been
It was Rob who asked me after DW last year, a couple of weeks after we were reflecting on the race, and he sort of said, would you like to do it with me one day? I think actually the year before I'd asked whether he wanted to, and he shot it down. So having seen maybe perhaps a glorious and sort of easier representation of the race last year, he was quite keen. I think this year, after a harder race, we're both approaching it with a bit more caution, but it would definitely be a really cool thing to tick off together if we can pull it off.
Tom, you have joined an impressive club. You are now a hat-trick paddler. Depending on who you ask, Jim Morrissey, Mick O'Meara, but certainly Jim King, Richard Hendren, and Mark Phillips, all hat-trick paddlers, and now you. How does that feel?
Well, it feels great. Nice company to be part of. It's not a sort of a record or a set of results that are particularly intended to try and get hold of, but I approach every race as it comes, and this year going in, it was coming off the back of a good paddle with Noushie last year. I was more confident about our chances this time round, even though we were up against different competition and more of it. But no, you enter a race, we're all competitors, we all want to win. So to come away with that, then, it couldn't be better, really.
It's interesting you say you felt more confident this year, because John went into it with a year's experience. He wasn't a first timer. Tom Simmons knew what he was doing. You had lost narrow races in the Waterside Series, so that's an interesting one.
Yeah, I get all that. That's true, and yeah, confidence is difficult to define, isn't it? Particularly when you don't know what the competitors are feeling like and how they're going. I mean, yes, we had a pretty good idea. We could see Joe and Andy particularly every day, but I guess the difference obviously was that we had been there and done it before. The main unknown was obviously Joe and Brindy, and you got to be fair to them to say they threw everything at this in the same way that we did. They were the ones I was most impressed by in the preparation and the training. Joe was obviously on our support team last year, and he said, he could see how to do it, and he sort of used that example and followed it precisely, and added his own elements on. So they did everything they could, and I was somewhat worried about them, to be honest. They were the ones I had my eye on, but just bearing in mind all of that, I knew what we could do, and everyone else could have a go at that too, but I felt confident.
I think Tom has always had a lot more confidence than me, but his confidence makes a huge difference to the boat. Like, even just when we were having bad patches, I was of the mind to definitely throw everything that I had at it, but Tom has such a great belief that we can do it at any time, which is really formidable and very impressive to have that mentality.
We obviously spent quite a lot of time together, training and talking about our race and preparing for the thing. And I could tell Noushie was a bit concerned, looking at Strava, all the time. You get to see in this one day everything that everybody else does, which is great, but it gets a bit addictive. And looking at particularly Brindy, who was just churning out hundreds of kilometers week after week relentlessly, very impressive. And that's why I say, the pair of them did everything they possibly could to get ready for the race, and they executed an excellent training plan. So credit to them for that. And I could tell, Noushie was worried about this, and if I'm honest, it worried me as well. But you have to put that sort of thing behind you, or you put it away. And we talked, and we were like, we know what we're doing. We've done it before. I think I said, Noushie, I promise we're going to win. And I didn't know if I could meet that promise, but if it's something that I know, I was like, yeah, we can do this. Why not?
And I think that's another thing that you and I have always benefited from, Tom, in that we train together so much because we live in the same place and train at the same club. It really makes it easy to. And if we're not training together, we're probably eating cake together at the canoe club. I'd like to say we understand each other really well and can be really communicative throughout the race and throughout training as well, which when you get to kind of a tricky patch and you can say, I feel sick, or I'm tired, or my arm hurts, or we're going really, really well and you should be really proud, makes a huge difference, I think.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, and obviously of the competitive boats, we were the only ones that had that advantage. Another thing, this race is not won by single measures or one-off things. You've got to add everything together, and you've got to be a little bit lucky on the day as well.
If we're going to throw loads of other things, one more is our amazing support crew, which was really largely the same team as last year, which probably helped. They knew the drill pretty well, but everyone contributed something really very big, and so sort of hugely grateful to them. But yeah, amazingly executed, and such a great pedigree between them of having supported hundreds of times and raced hundreds of times and raced internationally and things like that. So I felt like we were in very, very safe hands.
So your support crew consists of multiple DW winner Steve Baker, DW winner and mixed record holder Lizzie Broughton. You've got Rob, your boyfriend, who is a 2:37 marathon runner. And who else is in there? Because that is an elite level of athlete in your support crew, which is helps, in my opinion.
So we had Brett Irvine, who multiple DW finisher. He and I did the K1 in tandem effectively 10 years ago, 2015. He was partnered up with Steve Also in the car with Lizzie was, apart from Rob, we had Sam Lee Gill, who paddled with Noushie a couple of years ago. And, they were a familiar car. They were exactly the same from last year. The third car we had was Mike Channon and Peter Loy from Richmond Canoe Club. And they were crucial supporting our bike team. We had two excellent bikes. They were Arthur Leach and Will Stroud. And Will has supported me on each of the 3 DWs I've done. He was with us last year, and when I did it with Keith as well. And the bikes make a massive difference. When we're portaging in the dark on the canal, it's as though we're portaging in broad daylight. So they really helped us make sure we didn't lose a single second of time, and just de-risk the whole portaging process. So yeah, big thumbs up to all of those guys. Between them, their job was to make sure that we didn't mess up, and they did that perfectly. We didn't lose any time that we didn't have to. So thanks to them very much.
So Noushie, you are doing the race next year with Rob. Tom, are you going to give me a year off next year?
I think I promised you that, haven't I?
I think you did, yeah.
Someone I have promised a year off is my wife. She's quite keen that I don't do it next year, which I think is fair. It's a big toll. We've all got sort of loved ones that support us in the training, and it's relentless. We ramp up from New Year and every day for months, training hard. So yeah, I probably won't be racing next year. But I have taken on the job of organising the race. So I'm pretty sure I will not be absent. I'll be there doing my bit on the DW team. Trying to make sure everyone else gets down.
Well, you've already done a lot of work for the race this go around, not only the tideway recce's, but I was so impressed to see you on Monday, the day after you have just completed your own DW win, handing out medals to the Stages race finishers in Barnes.
Yeah, that was good fun. I felt like I had to go to Barnes. It was sort of the finish that I helped arrange. And obviously first time the race is finished there for the Stages, and first tideway finish for the stage race since 2019. So I was quite keen to make sure it went well. And yeah, that was the only job they could come up with me that was sort of low risk, that I couldn't mess up, was handing out the medals at the end. But that was a great honour to be able to do, and so impressive to see, the school kids particularly. There's a club junior K2 as well.
It might be worth mentioning at this point that Noushie, you started as a junior school's DW crew, and if any school kids are listening to this now, the pathway is there. You can go from being a school's crew, and then you can go and win, and you can become the most successful female athlete down the course ever.
Oh, I'm not sure I'd go so far as saying that, but yeah, definitely don't take DW as like a thing that you tick off once and it was the worst experience of your life and don't come back again. There are loads of other avenues of paddling, even if paddling 3-4 days without a whole lot of training was very, very tough. There's loads of other paddling experiences, and also come back to the DW, train a bit more, and have fun.
It was quite fun doing the Waterside series. Every time we go past a Marlborough College boat, Noushie would cheer them on. And I'm sure most of them looked around and go, oh, wow, there's Noushie. She won last year. Maybe she'll win this year. Didn't realise she was an ex-Marlborough College girl.
I'm bamboozled that none of the Marlborough boats have changed since I left 10 years ago. But it does make it very easy to recognise them. So yeah, always happy to give them a cheer. If anyone ever wanted to kind of ask me about how to go from being a school paddler to beyond, I'd be really happy to. I know certainly when I did DW in school, there wasn't much in terms of what happens after DW. A lot of schools are kind of looking at that. But for me, there was a bit of a void. It was like I'd experienced this sport that I really enjoyed and I wanted to do more, and the school needed to move on with a new batch of paddlers. So I went through that process of trying to find a club, and actually various clubs as I moved to uni and then came back to London. So really happy to kind of help someone else navigate those waters if needed.
Well, I think we're all very lucky that you got, chucked into a boat through school and then decided your first DW wouldn't be your last.
I guess beyond some good DW results, which have obviously been very pleasing, I think paddling has brought so much more to me. And so from those early school days to be able to ultimately, I moved to Richmond because of canoeing and developed this most amazing community. A few years ago, I had a flat tire, and Tom came and sorted my tire out for me. Had COVID, and people were dropping things off every day. There is such a strong community through the paddling world. So kind of beyond just paddling, you're bound to find some really good friends and good eggs who will help you.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Even if you two are not back as a crew again next year, it sounds like we'll maybe have to wait a bit, but I wouldn't be surprised to see you all smashing some records in the future, and look forward to following along whatever you all do end up doing next. So thank you again, and see you on the water.
Thank you. And Betsy, just to say, thank you so much from, I guess, the whole paddling community probably for streaming this race, because there were people watching from all over the world. It raises the profile of the race, and it's also really exciting for us to be in a race that is kind of so widely viewed, spoken about, understood. Even we went back to the canoe club a couple of days after the race, and someone said to us, I was watching from Japan, I'm a novice, I'm so inspired, I want to know more about it. And that was such a cool experience. So thank you for bringing it to kind of friends, family, and other people all around the world.
Thank you. That's what an incredible experience. And you all put on the race that was well worth streaming. So
you're welcome. Thanks, Betsy.
Thanks for having us.
And you too, Billy. Thanks for the race as well, Billy.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Yeah, I know. Yeah. It was a pleasure.
We are joined today by none other than the Devizes to Westminster 2025 second place crew by only 4 minutes. Welcome, Joe Peterson and Brindy Kraft. Thank you so much for coming on Paddlecast to talk about your race.
Great, thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah, good to be here.
In talking with both of you after the race, I realised that there was a lot going on in your boat that I wasn't aware of whilst racing against you. And even Betsy on the live stream didn't really know the full extent of what was going on. Sounds like both of you, as well as Tom and Anoushka, didn't have perfect races, but still went on to have exceptional performances. So massive congratulations for that. Starting with the first section of the race, the pound, called that because there's no portaging. You were actually in 8th place at the first checkpoint in Pewsey, 7th at the checkpoint at Hungerford, and you didn't break into the top 4 until 35 miles into the race at Newbury. It looked like you took that first section pretty easy. Was that part of your plan? And were you getting any updates from your support crew at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realise that we were in 8th at Pewsey. We were definitely off our target pace, but we were kind of going on feeling more than anything at that point in the race. We kind of knew that it was a long game, obviously. So, it was quite difficult with the headwind and the weed and it feeling shallow. So we kind of just stuck to our own rhythm, and I think that kind of paid off later on.
Yeah, I guess it may be worth clarifying. We didn't know any standings at this point at all. We had asked to receive no race information unless very particular situations happened until Shepperton. And so we had no idea we were in 8th. And I mean, for me personally in the boat, I felt very comfortable with how we were doing. And I would have been quite surprised because I thought it felt quite good. And even though we were behind our pace, it felt like that was the right pace for us to be at given the conditions that we're paddling in.
If you ran the race again, would you go all the way to Shepperton without any time splits, or would you like some further up the course?
It depends, I think, because we had a vague idea of what was going on, especially behind us with Tom and Noushie. So I thought it would be difficult for us both to be wildly off kind of the pace at the front of the race. So that kind of helped. I think maybe we would keep it the same. It worked for us, I think, quite nicely. Maybe slightly earlier, but I was happy with how it went.
I think it really allowed me to focus on trusting that we had something good to focus on without worrying about anyone else. Yeah, I think it made the race more enjoyable than if I'd been worrying about how other teams were doing.
I have heard after the race from someone else that at Fobney Lock, as you were getting into the water, Tom and Anoushka were in the lock cut. So they were incredibly close behind you. How would you have felt getting caught?
I was thinking it as we were paddling through kind of Fobney, and was doing the maths, and I think I would have felt quite calm, because for them to have caught us there, they would have had to have done a fantastic time to the end of the canal, and because of the flow and the headwind and everything, I would have felt quite confident that we would have been able to pull away later in the race, and we would have been able to time it well. Obviously, if that hadn't have happened, if they'd caught us up and then stayed with us, then fair play to them. We would have put our hands down on that and said well done. But I don't think I was too worried about being caught at that point.
Yeah, I think I very much had the feeling of if they catch us, then fair play. There was times when I was feeling sick where I kind of thought, well, if they caught us, then it'd be over, and that would be a relief.
So as the race went on and we moved from the canal onto the Thames, it looked like you held pretty steady. And this is me talking, having looked at the checkpoints after the race. We didn't get any updates on you. I actually assumed you were out of the race because we didn't hear anything about you until Teddington. You really started gaining ground against John and I and Tom and Anoushka on the lower half of the Thames. So were you really going for it at this section? Was this it must have been solely based on your feel, because you said you didn't have any time checks.
I say we didn't have any time checks. We got to Bolters, and our crew did tell us then that Andy and Tom Simmons were 2 minutes ahead of us down the river, and they were moving quite well on the water, but their portages were slightly slower than ours. So we were slowly making ground, and wanted to catch them. So we were pushing, I think, a bit harder, maybe too hard at that point. But yeah, the boat felt great, especially after Marlow. It felt great before Bolters when we didn't realise we were catching them up, but afterwards there was a real kind of urgency to the way we were paddling. We were, I think, into like the latter stages of our race plan there. So we were pushing on, especially at Shepperton when we found out the splits to the other crews. We were going for it there.
Were you getting splits on us?
No,
right.
We'd asked.
It was in the briefing.
Yeah. We wanted to know the race situation at Shepperton, and if you were in the race, then
right.
Yeah, but Tim. So Tim Dowden was the guy who gave us our splits, and he didn't say anything about you. I think I must have heard something from somewhere that you were doing okay. But the moment I knew that you were doing well was when someone from Andy and Tom's crew shouted at them saying that they were 6 minutes down on third.
Right.
And I was like, well, I did the maths and I was like, well, that means we're 3 minutes up on third. And now I was like, it must be Billy and John. So it is really tight now. Even the podium wasn't secure.
I was a bit checked out of working all that stuff out after I was sick at Chertsey. When Tim told Joe the race situation, I actually didn't hear any of it, and he had to tell me while we were paddling afterwards.
I want to go back to the moment where you heard that Tom and Andy were 2 minutes behind you on the river. What was your feeling when you heard that?
Quite a positive moment. I remember going kind of like, what? And I think Joe also said something that sounded like I was a bit surprised. And then kind of a feeling of like that we knew that we were going to catch them, and then it meant that because we'd had the sense that we were being caught earlier on, and I think we'd felt like that had backed off a bit as the night had gone on. But it kind of felt like confirmation that we were moving well and that we're making progress through the field. Which we hadn't had any information or confirmation of that like externally before then.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said 2 minutes ahead of you on the river, right?
Yeah, I would also say that my low point was earlier in the night on the Upper Thames because we were so alone. It's so bleak when it's like 1 a.m. and it's just open fields, quite a wide river, and the pitch black, and we knew we weren't going to see any other boats for quite a long time. So actually getting that confirmation that we were approaching the field ahead of us and we were going to see some friendly faces and other people going through the same thing of us was a bit of a lift too. And
then did you wash hang with them for a bit when you caught them?
Yes, we did. I can't remember for how long exactly, but it was we went through a few portages wash hanging with them. There was one where we had to have extra glow sticks fitted, so we actually had to drop back and then recatch them, but that was quite smooth. It happened quite quickly. And then after Shepperton, they dropped onto our tail wash into the headwind. And then I kind of looked back a bit later and they'd drop back a bit more.
Yeah, it was probably about an hour, 2 hours where we were together. And we were working well together. I think we both had a very similar water pace. But yeah, after Shepperton, obviously we were ramping up, and I think they were starting to ramp down a bit. So they kind of, I almost didn't even notice when we were alone after that.
What would you have said that gained you, like working with them, probably like 3-4 minutes?
No. If anything, I think it lost us 5.
Oh. Now I'm being cheeky, but no, that would have been, we'd have enjoyed it if we were lonely at that point as well.
Yeah, it helped. I do think we worked too hard to catch up. I realize that now, and it's an information thing. If I'd have known that they were genuinely moving about the same speed as us on the water, it was only at the locks that we were cutting into that gap. And I think if I'd have known that, I would have just then stuck to our own pace, and we would have rolled through the portages and we'd have got them anyway. And then we would have still got that rest without having to have worked a bit harder anyway. So you could never know whether it was overall beneficial or overall not, but I think it probably did help us.
So, Brindy, you were sick at Chertsey. How was that the first time that you were feeling ill? Were you feeling ill before then?
So I started feeling ill not long after the kit change. And it wasn't like I felt quite nauseous and clammy. I was very afraid that it was going to get worse because I was very conscious with it being my first time and that being a big part of the way that everyone was thinking about like how the race was going to play out. I really didn't want to be responsible for a race ending mistake. And so I felt like I tried to invest as much as possible in trying to like minimize how risky I was as like a contributor to the boat. And so I'd done a lot of research on like what could make me sick, how much am I going to fuel myself so I don't hit a wall. And so that feeling of starting to be nauseous was quite a dark moment for me. I remember telling Joe, like, I need you to tell me that it's going to get better. And then he did. He was like, oh, it's going to get better. And then it did, which was, I thought like, maybe it was just a lie to like keep us going. So yeah, backing off on food during the more intense portaging without stopping completely definitely helped there. And so at that point, I definitely was having a lot of reflux, and I had to swallow down small bits of vomit a couple of times. But then it went away entirely for a while. I kind of didn't see it like coming, like it came back a little bit, but maybe it sounded quite bad. I've seen a video where it sounded really bad. So Joe had kind of been asking, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, it's more annoying than anything else. Like, I think I'm going to be fine. And then as we got in the water at Chertsey and we did a feed, and they gave me a little bit of acid reflux medication as well. Somehow something, it just felt like no, like, and I felt like I vomited for ages. It felt like 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 times that I just hurled like everything up. It was all over my spray deck. Some of it got in Joe's hair.
Got some good
and it just was that feeling where it's just like shooting out of, like, it felt like everything came up, and I was really, really afraid that it was going to be a race ending like failure, that I didn't have enough nutrition or enough hydration to keep us going for the rest of the race.
Wow. That's really intense. Did you say it wasn't just the race? I mean, we're going into gory details here, so listeners can skip ahead a few seconds if they need to. But I mean, that has a huge, it would, I expect, have a huge impact. And you said it wasn't just the race food that came out either. It was even like pre-race.
And so I was kind of looking at it being like, well, what's all come up? Like, what do I have left in me? Like, what's going to fuel me? And I mean, there was loads of potato skins, but then also seeing bits of pasta. And I know that I hadn't had pasta since before the start of the race. Well, that was the food that I ate before the start of the race, and kind of looking down at that and being like, right, well, everything's come up. I have no idea how much I have left in the tank to fuel me. And we have like 50K to go, 55K to go.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, that was something that I found really almost kind of like shocking, because Chertsey is 95 miles into the race. It's between the Old Windsor and Shepperton checkpoints. And when we look at the data of the race and your timings between each of these checkpoints, that's like when you two were almost going the fastest, when you were gaining ground against the other crews.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel pretty proud that so I had this massive vomiting that felt like like this whole body like horrible experience to me, and then we immediately take the lead, and Tom and Andy are sitting on our side watch, and I thought that was like pretty tough. We just kept paddling. Yeah, I mean, I could see that Joe was still feeling strong, and I could feel the boat was going well. For me, like I didn't feel bad, but I felt scared I was going to feel bad. I don't know how much I was actually contributing, and like what my actual mental state was relative to what was going on. But yeah, it felt like we could keep going. It was more like this anticipation of like, this is like I'm gonna have to pay for this later.
Yeah. Oh my God. Joe, how did you feel when that happened? Other than slightly damp on the back of your head.
I did not know that I had sick on the back of my head. Luckily for Brindy, I found out at the finish line.
I'm sorry.
I was quite calm about it, really. I mean, we once you've made it that far, and I mean, I felt fine. I kind of knew we were going to make it to Westminster, so I was relaxed about that. And for me, I had my partner in 2023, Sean, was sick really early on, like 65 kilometers into the race. So, and he was fine afterwards. So I was kind of like I wanted Brittany to calm down and not worry. And we were still moving well, and make sure she took food in at the next stop, and we were fine. So, I knew we'd be fine. I think there was no panic. I also, like, by that point you kind of don't really care. Like, you just roll with the punches.
Wow. That was an amazing recovery. We talked about sort of when you were getting splits updates and everything. So when you all got to Teddington, you actually had, well, looking at it later, you were in first place at Teddington. You might not have known that immediately because Tom and Anoushka were behind you. What was the update that you got at Teddington going onto the tideway?
I don't think we did get an update, really. In terms of like the split times, we got the split time from Shepperton at Molesey, because Tom and Anoushka had come through by then. But at Teddington, there hadn't been like a proper GPS update, and I don't think our support crew were hanging around waiting to time Tom and Noushie through, so they didn't really know. I think I knew that it would be close. I didn't get told Billy and John's, or if I did, there was too much going on for me to take it in. And again, kind of the theme of our race was there wasn't really anything we could do about the other crews, but there was a lot we could do about ourselves. So we just got on and carried on, and knew that if we went down the tideway as fast as we could, then that was the best we could do, and we'd see how we got, what result we came out of at the end.
So we were obviously an hour down the river, having started earlier. So it wasn't the easiest to get splits on you, because when we got to Teddington, you'd probably only just gone through Shepperton. So I think we didn't get a split. We just got told, there's nothing in it. I think we got told there's like 3 minutes between the top crews, and I think that was the first time we got told about you. And then we pushed hard on the tideway. We were already been pushing very hard. We had an update at Runnymede that we were just a couple of minutes behind Tom and Anoushka, and that we could go for the win if we wanted it. And we went hard from there. And then at Molesey, again, we were told if we wanted to win, we could. And we hammered the tideway. So you've just sort of answered that, but how hard did you go on the tideway?
We went as hard as we could.
Yeah.
It was really, really painful, I think, for both of us at that point. Yeah, my elbows and wrists just felt like every stroke was agony, but I mean, for me at least, our support crew were running along the bank shouting, and I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the sense was like, it's close, and so it felt like you have to keep trying. And yeah, there's not much left to give, but we're still trying.
Yeah, Tim was running alongside us at points, and he was, every time my paddles went down, he would scream at us to keep moving forwards. I think we were moving okay until about Putney, and then I think I started to flounder a little bit and was struggling. But it was all we could do to put our blades in the water. We were still working as hard as we could, and I think there was maybe a bit of a lift in the last kilometre. I felt Brindy pushing on as we went through Lambeth Bridge, but there was nothing left.
Joe, I've seen the video. Brindy was the only one in the boat pushing on. You were just support stroking. So that's a bit of an understatement.
That was in the plan, though. If Joe
Yeah.
had to do support strokes, that I should keep paddling forward.
If we'd have
So-
swam, we would have come third. So
Yeah.
that was justified.
Yeah, no. You did what you needed to do.
I think actually, like for me, like thinking about the tideway, like I feel so like confident in the fact that we'd given everything that we had and that we were happy with the race that we'd done. But I still feel a bit haunted by those 4 minutes of like wanting to be in a position where we could fight more at the very end. Not that we were, I don't know, like we were fighting. It was so hard to do anything. It felt like it was all, it did feel like it was slipping away, even though we were giving everything we had. I'd like to be in a position where I could feel stronger or not, or feel like a stronger threat to win at the end. I'm just very haunted by those 4 minutes, and especially that it's the tideway. I think, I was big talk about my surf ski background and I'll enjoy it, and it was so painful for me. That's the one bit that I think I'd like to have different memories of than what I have now.
So you've already half answered this question, but with hindsight, do you feel there's a way you could get those 4 minutes and manufacture a win from that race?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, obviously, yes, there are scenarios where we would win, and because it was so close, and if we'd have gone a bit faster earlier and maybe held back a bit through Windsor, or had a quicker change at Teddington, or Brindy hadn't been sick. Like there are various things that stack up to like probably would have won, but there's nothing that glaringly shouts out in that race. There's no such thing as a perfect run down DW. Not over 17 hours. I think that was our best effort.
Yeah, I agree.
I've looked at your race and it's marginal, isn't it? You'd have to be really critical, harshly critical to say that there's 4 minutes there. I think you had a storming run down, an amazing run for a first timer and a second timer. It was incredible, and it showed how good your preparation was.
Yeah, agreed. I think we got pretty much everything spot on in our preparation and our training. It's just maybe a shame that it was windy and flowing like that. Maybe if the race had been an hour shorter, it might have suited us better. But again, like it's all hypothetical.
Yeah, given the race that happened, I don't think that there was a clear way that we could have won. There's no moment that I've said to Joe, like there's no moments that I look back on like if we'd done this differently, we would have won or we could have won. I think the way that we could win is if it hadn't been my first time. I think it would have probably been easier.
Brindy, you've said you've already started thinking about things you would change for a future run. And I think we're all probably agreed that the first time tends to be the hardest, and that once you kind of come back again, it's a real learning curve, and you improve more rapidly. Do you have any concrete plans for returning again, or will we have to come back to you on that?
I don't know. It feels so soon. I think. I also think like something definitely that happens for me with this kind of like project is that I get very invested. It was the same when I entered Cape Point for the first time. I got so invested and it became such a big focus. It becomes quite consuming. And I enjoy that and it feels like fun. But I don't like if I can't get invested too soon because it consumes too much of my life. So I've got to kind of take a step back and breathe for a second.
Fair enough.
Joe, are you going to be back next year?
I'm not sure about next year. I would be really surprised if I ended up doing the straight through race next year. Maybe the K1. But I think the winter you have to commit to it. And like it was great training with Brindy. We committed a lot of time to it. But it sucks at other parts of life. And it's not fair. I don't think it's fair on the people around me to do that 2 years in a row. So maybe in a couple of years, but I would be surprised if I was racing next year. I'll be involved in some capacity, but I don't think I'll race.
Some honest answers.
Yeah. But you never know how it's going to change. If you all are not already committed to your DW races for next year, do you all have any upcoming plans for racing again anytime soon?
I think something that definitely happened is I finished this feeling of feeling a little bit invincible for having survived the race and it having gone quite well. And so I'm excited to paddle more. So kind of like I'm just looking at the calendar being like, how can I do everything that I can? Because I'm feeling very excited. I'm not feeling physically strong yet, but I'm feeling really excited.
Completing DW definitely gives you that invincible feeling, doesn't it? As it should.
Joe, what about you? Have you got big summer plans?
I'll race next weekend at the K1 races, the short course especially. I think it's a great event that I quite enjoy. I'll race at the Nationals in the summer, I think. But no, I feel fit and quite pain free now a week later. So it would be nice to keep this momentum going through the season, but we'll see.
And Brindy, are you racing at X Bay as well? Do you have some surf ski plans too?
No, so I've been given very express permission from Jim Taylor Ross to focus on marathon for at least the first part of the season. I think I'm less competitive at marathon, but it's nice to have a challenge. So I want to give it a shot before I get to all. And then surf ski, I'll definitely be pivoting to focusing on that as we go into Worlds towards the end of the year. I think the trip to South Africa should be really fun because you can pack in Fish, Surf Ski Worlds, and Pete Marlin back to back, and I'm pretty keen to do those. And it might line up well with doing some research while I'm there for my PhD, so everything kind of coming together quite nicely for that, at least.
Well, thank you all so much for coming on Paddlecast today. Thank you for sharing so much about your race, and it's just incredible to hear. And again, I think particularly there's so many things that you all did overcome to reach a really incredible performance. I mean, Brindy doing your first ever ultra and coming second by 4 minutes in DW, that's amazing. Coming back from being ill on the course, making it down a difficult tideway. But it sounds like you all really did put in all of the training that you needed to get to that point. So not an entirely surprising result, but still incredibly impressive. So thank you again, and congratulations, and see you on the water.
See you on the water.
Thanks.
See you then.
We are switching things up a bit for this interview because instead of hosting, Billy is going to be in the hot seat talking about his Devizes to Westminster race with John O'Grady. Billy, this is what happens when you land on the podium.
I'll take it.
So joining me as a guest host is Devizes to Westminster live stream commentator and 2023 C2 winner with myself. We've got to brag a little bit. James Prowse. Welcome, James. Thank you so much for joining us in the host seat today.
Thanks, Betsy. And Billy, I'll try to do the hosting seat justice.
So our listeners, you all will have just heard from the first place crew, Tom Sharp and Anoushka Freeman, and the second place crew, Joe Peterson and Brindy Kraft. And we are now rounding out the DW race interviews with third place crew, Billy Butler and John O'Grady. So welcome to Billy and welcome, John.
Thank you. So even though you came together as a crew fairly late, you managed to have a pretty clean race. What factors do you think went into that?
I think Billy would probably agree. We've raced together probably since 2019, was it?
I think so.
Yeah, on and off racing. So we're reasonably drilled. Obviously, we did last year, and then when it came about this year, I think we're not too far off being able to jump in a boat and make it move.
Yeah, we had that. I was in the UK for Waterside B, so we said, "Shall we try it out?" We did try another boat, and it just wasn't working, was it? And we took the gamble to go down to Newbury to jump in the boat we used at last year's DW, and it just worked again. We just got in the boat, and it was like we hadn't really been out of it very much. I mean, it's not perfect, is it? But it works. It's a nice boat that runs as it's not a perfect sprint boat, is it, John? But it's a good sort of marathon boat, or certainly a good ultra boat.
Yeah, it's a good solid boat, and I think we can communicate when things don't run quite smoothly. We communicate it together. Leaning left, leaning right. We kind of put it back together reasonably quickly. More so this year, I think we were quite good at that this year.
Yeah, I think we were. Yeah.
So are there any things about paddling with each other, like obviously you get in different boats with different people and you do different things to paddle well with them? Is there anything that you two match up or sort of specifically try and look at? Like, I know, for instance, when Betsy and I were racing together, I have to shorten my stride length on the portages.
When Billy talks, his rate will change a little bit. So if he starts having a conversation with someone, I've got to just be on it that rate's going to change. But other than that, I think he's pretty solid guy to be behind, really.
Should we tell people why I sit in the front and you sit in the back, John?
Yeah, we can do, yeah, because it does look a bit odd, doesn't it, that way around?
I can't keep time in the back, and I'm terrible, and so I have to sit in the front, and it's just lucky that John can do it and keep time with me, and he also puts up with my rate, which is, as he just said, occasionally erratic, but I think it's most part pretty solid, and he puts up with it. Occasionally he just goes, come on, you're rating a bit high, and I do drop it down for him.
I do quite like being in the back, though. I'm quite a back man, really, so it works well.
And I know running, obviously we know, John, you joined a running club, and I think we've heard quite a lot about how you value running training, Billy. Was there any, so from my putting a race together perspective, what was your approach to Crofton and Froxfield, and sort of would you be willing to share your strategy on that?
I think we got lucky this year, didn't we, Bill?
We did. We had a lovely Crofton. So Crofton came just after Dan and David's rudder had gone. We were too cold to wait for them, stop still and wait for them. So we paddled gently, and we sort of used Crofton as the opportunity to let them catch up. And we took Crofton at a snail's pace. It was lovely.
So I didn't need to join a running club, James.
Yeah, no, all that wasted time. Unbelievable.
I know.
On the timing question, I did look at the photo evidence at the end of the race and the video evidence. And so we can confirm that John is pretty good at keeping time with Billy, even after 125 miles.
Yeah, lucky pictures.
Which a lot of the crews did, I think, have a bit of a hard time with. So
he is good. It's very nice to be in a boat with him.
I think a lot of that probably comes from doing lots of different paddling and things. So it's probably just ingrained in the brain.
So, John, as you've just mentioned, you've come from a very multidisciplinary paddling background. You actually have international vests in marathon kayaking, outrigger, whitewater rafting, and dragon boating, as well as some very impressive results in sprint kayaking. More recently, you've also started wild water racing. Do you think that multidisciplinary background has helped you in the build up to the DW?
Yeah, I mean, I think being multidisciplined with anything, it's more strings to the bow, isn't it? So it'll always bring things together, and you can lean on different parts at different times. You don't really know what's going to help when. It'll just suddenly jump out at you, and without you realizing, you've brought something into play from the archive that is going to help. But yeah, definitely with timing and things, I'd say 100%. Everything I did before I started in K1 was team events. So yeah, timing was pretty big on it. So yeah, I mean, the river racing, I'd probably say I've been getting quite a lot of help from Nikki Cresser and Jamie. And they want me to be more vertical with my paddling, which more along vertically to the boat, pulling down. But that's not really too good for DW. It's a lot more keep your arms low, and just saving that energy, just keeping things low and low impact on no big catches.
One thing that actually I think I've noticed in the boat since you started doing your river racing is your lines. You're helping me with my line steering, and it was something we noticed last year's DW. We possibly because it was so dark, and also possibly just my driving, we hugged the left bank a lot. And this year we made a conscious effort to really make sure we were in the middle of a river. There was more light this year, so it was easier to do that. But in last year's DW just being so dark, you really didn't know where you were. But no, you've been. I mean, calling you a backseat driver would be a bit of a diss, but it's been really quite good for us a lot of times, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think last year was probably a lot more challenging with conditions, wasn't it, than this year.
Yeah.
So, but obviously we do a bit of descent racing as well and things, so it all comes into play.
But you all did have a much better race this year compared to last year. And, whether that's sort of the lines that you're taking on the river. John, you joined a run club over the winter. What else kind of went into that?
Well, things between me and Bill came together, like we said, quite late notice, really, after Waterside B and C. So I was kind of flirting with myself with the idea of doing the singles, so I was kind of keeping reasonably fit. I had eventually heeded the advice from Billy and started getting on the running. Eventually. So to his dismay that it took me this long to do. But no, I've started really enjoying that. And it's something different. It's really accessible. It's not that time consuming. You just get out, you get it done, you get it back. And it brings a lot. So no, it's good for that side of things.
Do you think it was just the fact that it was your second time doing the race that also made a difference in your sort of preparation or mindset?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was lucky last year to be doing it with Billy. He's done so many, so there was loads of nuggets of information that I was getting. So I was, for a first time going into it, I was in good stead. However, you've still got to overcome that challenge of DW. So I think last year, I would say that I let the race control me, probably, because it was quite an overawing thing. Whereas coming into it this year, I felt a lot more in control of it. I knew what it was going to throw at me. I knew there'd be new things that it threw at me. But yeah, I was just more in control of it. And I think as well, it was helping that, I felt more like involved as a team, as me and Billy. Last year, I was kind of just following, if you like, because, he's been there and walked the walk with it. So whereas this year, I think it was a little bit more open to, bringing ideas together and doing it that way.
Yeah, I mean, we, coming at it so late this year, we were very relaxed about it, really, weren't we? We were just sort of like, what will be will be. Let's just get down the course. We're both in fairly reasonable shape. We both had some little niggles, and let's just do what we can do. But am I allowed to mention your injury last year?
Yeah, that was a big thing, really.
So last year, within the first hour, I hit something in the water, and I didn't see what it was. It was something just below the surface. It was a log or a bucket floating in the water, and it very nearly had us in. We took a huge wobble, and John did some massive support stroke and saved the boat, but in the process did his elbow in and was almost immediately calling to the support at the bridges that he wanted painkillers at the first portage. So, and that made a huge impact to our race. I don't know if you saw the picture of John's hands at the end of last year's race, but he was gripping the paddle in a completely different way because his elbow was hurting. He was moaning like mad in the back half the time, and it just, to do that race, I mean, it took sort of a Herculean effort to be in that much pain from an hour in, and then to sort of put up with it for another 13 and a half hours was pretty good. And very luckily we didn't have that this year. I mean, every single stick that was in the canal, I called out, much to David and Dan's dismay. You know, I think they were fed up of the commentary on sticks and buckets and debris in the canal, but we weren't taking any chances.
It was a little excessive.
Well, yeah. We started the race and, you know, we none of that. I don't remember a single low from really either of us. I don't know if you had a low. Did you have any?
No, I think we had a section where we got tired. We did go through a good few hours where we got tired, and then there was just a little bit of a mishap between communication with support and getting us some caffeine. So yeah, we got a bit quiet, a bit grumpy with one another. I said I'm bored just because I was getting so tired. So Billy started talking about canoeing, and I said that's not what I need right now. But I think that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. Whereas I can remember quite a few lows last year, including, well, I sang to you last year, didn't I, around Newbury area?
You did.
Which you also said. You also said it didn't help, so I didn't bother with that this year.
Newbury's quite early to be going to such extremes, really.
Yeah, it wasn't a request, James. It's got an angelic voice. Let's leave it at that.
What kind of updates were you getting from your support crew? And were you surprised when you heard how close you were to the other top crews?
So I knew the schedule pretty well in my head. You know, we were very much sort of aiming for 5 hours at Newbury, 8 hours at Reading. You know, it was just a real, like, basic, roughly this, roughly that. You're in the ballpark with those figures. We didn't necessarily get an update on the other crews until maybe Marlow. Or were we at Marsh? Maybe at Marsh, we got told we were something like 8 minutes down on Tom and Noushie. And we were very close. Were we within 90 seconds of Tom and Andy? And
yeah,
that was
at that point.
Yeah, I think for a little while we were getting updates that we were close with Tom and Andy. And we didn't get a single update on Joe and Brindy. But it wasn't until Runnymede when our support crew jumped out of the car when the road is right next to the river and shouted that we were only 3 minutes down on Tom and Noushie and go for the win. At that point we started motoring. That was just after we had been struggling with falling asleep. And I think at the last portage we'd been given a Coke. So we'd been given a Coke and some Pro Plus, someone told me. I don't know how true that is. And then just round the corner, the support crew gets out of the car and tells you that you're in contention for the win. And, with hindsight now, we know that it was partly because they fell in, and because they were ill. But at the time, we were 8 minutes down. And then all of a sudden, we've made up 5 minutes. And we woke up. At that point, we really woke up and we just started going for it. And I've never felt our boat go quite so well, to be honest, John. Have you?
No, it was good. It was good. It felt really good. It was an excitement within the boat together. It was good at that point. I mean, we lasted for a good while with that momentum as well. And then obviously we had to start getting a bit more sensible and just coming back off it slightly. But it wasn't even a discussion. It just kind of ran into something that was a bit more kind of substantially paced for the rest of what we had to do.
Was that where you started? So I don't know exactly where you were aiming for in the tide window, but you seemed to get to Teddington on the earlier side of when you might have wanted to. So do you think that was because it was all just going a bit better than you'd perhaps expected?
So we discussed it with David. We decided to start with David and Dan because we wanted to try and break into that, the top three. And it was sort of John Morrissey was sort of one of the first people to mention it to me, and then sort of it gained momentum from there. So David and I sat down, and John had done a lot of work with spreadsheets, and so John Morrissey, John had done a lot of work
on working out what sort of time we were going to do. I used John Ince's database for my scheduling, and it normally seems pretty accurate. And we allowed a bit for the wind, and David and I sort of decided that we would both be expecting around 17:45. So we were aiming for around half an hour after high water, and really felt that with the wind and the flow, that 17:45 would be about a time that our crews would have done. As it turned out, we were quicker. I certainly wouldn't have wanted to have arrived any earlier than high water, and now looking back, I really wish we were at half an hour after, but we were aiming for half an hour after.
On that point, was there anything else, other than sort of that 30 minutes in the scheduling window that you all might have done differently, knowing what you know now?
I think, it's easy to sit here after a race, isn't it, and say, what you'd change, but it's all hindsight. I think, as Bill said, with the wind, we expected more. We were quite looking forward to more, being a heavier boat, and it just never really came. But other than that, I don't think we wouldn't change too much. Maybe, again, with hindsight, knowing that, David and Dan had the issues, we could have gone earlier. But again, the plan was, it was a gentleman's agreement. We were going to do it. We were going to stick with it. So again, it's just hindsight, isn't it? You can look back and change things, but
then maybe if you'd have pushed harder at the start, you might not have had such a strong second wind coming further down. And it's all if buts and maybes at this point.
Sure is, yeah, sure is. With regards to the updates, it's always a good job, really, because I'm deaf as anything in a boat, so they kind of shout that to Billy, and Billy relays it to myself. But I think it kind of works quite well that way, doesn't it, Bill? With you kind of have your schedule that you push, and then I work kind of just on blocks in the back. So for me, I just work to certain hours. So I've got the first 10 hours. I don't even look at anything. I just get that first 10 hours done. And then from there, it's get through the night. And then from there, it's obviously see where we're at. But no, updates are all to you, Bill, aren't they? Because I'm always in the back saying, "What did she say?"
I mean, we've got the water splash. Everyone that's paddling, getting information from the bank has to put up with the water splashing, and it is hard to hear. But I mean, there was absolutely no mistaking what Alex said to us at Runnymede. It was, her voice was breaking when she shouted the time gap and to push on for the win. It was brilliant. It was really that was the best thing a support crew has ever said to me, I think.
And you guys weren't necessarily expecting that.
Well, it's DW, isn't it? Anything can happen. The best of boats can have problems, and as they did, and you've just got to be there ready to pounce. I think that's the one thing I've started learning. You've got to be in it to win it. So as long as you're doing your job, then you're in a moment where you can react if things start changing.
And it seems like you all have recovered pretty well after the race. John, did you run a marathon last weekend?
Yeah, I did the Manchester Marathon. It was I had 5 days off, 6 days off. Did a gentle 5K to just make sure the legs worked. And then, went, and there wasn't any pressure on it. It was about going and just enjoying the event and getting through it. So it was my first marathon. It was good. Enjoyed it. Monday wasn't very pleasant, but no, it was good.
I feel a bit sorry for your body, because you said you didn't lift your arms above your head until the end of the marathon when you waved at the crowd. And your poor body couldn't lift its arms above shoulder height for 1 week, and now you can't climb the stairs the next. It probably doesn't know what's going on, does it?
Yeah, well, it's having like you, it's having 2 weeks off now.
Yeah.
I think you said you had Alex Lane on the bike. How do you sort of set that up?
I mean, last year we were looking at bike options, and we were sort of like, oh, this person, and we were like, oh, crikey, like if anything happens to them, they're probably, they might need a bit of looking after. And then Dougal popped up and said I could go on the bike, At which point I was like, brilliant. You know, if you fall in the ditch, you know, you'd probably just pull your blanket over yourself, sleep there till the morning, and then get going. You know, and Dougal would be fine. He was the best option on the bike at the time. But Alex Lane just sort of said, "Oh, do you want me on the bike?" And I said, "Well, if you fancy it." Alex Lane had actually done a 20k run in the morning, and then she went and marshalled all day at the tunnel, and then she supported us all night. So yeah, she's a machine. That's why she's a DW winner and ladies record holder.
And what do you two get as a pair in the boat by having someone there on the bike?
I would say she was ruthless. So if there was any points where you were just coming off the boil slightly, she was just on you. Before you knew you were coming off the boil, she was on it. You know, Bill's got a good bit about the portage. She pulled you up on one. She was great, wasn't she? She was on everything before we knew it, and then obviously you as well. If there's anything you're having to request, you know, little bits of cramp or anything like that, your drinks bottles empty, anything, she can relay that to the rest of the team.
Yeah, she also, I mean, it's not top secret, but she lights up if she goes behind you on the portage. You know, it illuminates us running over the portage, so that's really good. She hovers the light across the canal, which, you know, sort of helps illuminate that. And there's plenty of times where, whilst we do have a good torch on the boat, you just, when it's that dark, you just come off it a little bit going into some corners, and sometimes the light of the bike just helps you keep on the gas into some corners that you're not completely confident with. So having a bike there is very good. I mean, having Alex was brilliant because she was just on it. She understood kayakers completely. I mean, the rest of our support crew was great. I mean, we had a pretty tip-top support crew as well, didn't we? Really, we had Julian Anderson, who was one of the few that was allowed to do DW last year. We had Albert Hicks, who, you know, he's been to the World Championships twice. He's a top-level paddler. We also had Chris Parr, who runs your running club, who has never seen a canoe before, but brought a completely different aspect. You know, he's a really experienced guy at supporting runners. He's done lots of crewing
He does
for
ultra running,
running.
doesn't he?
Yeah. So he, you know, it was good having him. You know, I wouldn't have wanted to said grab the front of a canoe because I don't know if he'd have known which one was the front of the canoe.
He did actually make that mistake at the front.
Did he?
Yeah, when we were at the wharf at the beginning. Yeah.
So, but for everything else, looking after us, you know, understanding what we might need in the middle of the night, he was all over it, wasn't he? So we had a really good support crew. It was lovely.
Yeah, I think a support crew, it's make great. I think they are just as important, and you know, although we end up with the medals or whatever, they deserve medals as well because you couldn't do it without them. A good support crew really gets you down that course.
And I'm a little bit worried that you all have done too good of a job praising Alex Lane. I think you need to book her in for next year now because the demand is going to be high.
Well, do you want to know a secret that it definitely won't be a secret now? There are rumors that she might be entering.
That would be amazing if Alex enters. I really hope so. I'm excited. Do you all have more races planned coming soon, either individually or as a crew boat?
As a crew, I think we're toying with Liffey, aren't we? See what else
Toying
is out
with
there.
it?
Yeah, well, yeah, we're doing it. We're doing it. That's the
Yeah.
diary. Yeah. I'm sure Billy's got some big things on the horizon, as he always does. You know what he's like in those surf skis. For me, I'll probably get back into the river racing. Get back into the wild water. Keep honing my craft there. It's great to learn a new skill really with that. So I was really enjoying that process.
I'm definitely, I want us to go well at the Liffey, and I am ramping up my running again. but yeah, in terms of long distance in the surf, actually, I've got a race on Saturday. Betsy, are you coming? Are you going to X Bay?
I am. I think actually by the time this airs, we will have been and done it. We will hopefully be able to share with listeners after X Bay, after they listen to this, the live podcast recording that we are planning after the X Bay race this weekend. So thank you so much to John for joining, to Billy for joining in the hot seat, and to James for joining in the host seat today. Really, really appreciate you all coming on and sharing about your race. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Betsy.
So that was so cool. I really enjoyed getting to hear from all of the podium crews. Obviously, Billy, you and I had talked a fair bit about your race, but it was nice to hear from John about it as well. And I was really a bit surprised and impressed by how much the top two crews of Tom Sharp and Anoushka Freeman and Joe Peterson and Brindy Kraft were willing to share with us and be open about. I think it's nice to, it feels refreshing and interesting and insightful when the crews share so much. And for me, you know, having watched the race, it was kind of surprising to hear how much those top two crews in particular struggled during the race and still managed to come out with such amazing results, especially the sickness side of things. Tom and Anoushka, you know, when they went into the water after being a bit ill, getting clumsy, falling in, it just really makes what I already thought were impressive performances that much more impressive.
Yeah, I agree. Like that for me, it was the sickness. I mean, I had a little inkling that something wasn't quite right when we were getting the time splits. And, you know, I sort of thought, oh, maybe something's going wrong. I didn't know that. I had assumed that Joe and Brindy were out of a race, as we weren't getting any updates on them. And we only got one at Teddington, and I was like, oh, they're still in the race. Well, very much in the race. They were right up there. But yeah, and I think looking back on it now, you know, having done the waterside races against them, you know, it was probably that sickness that made the race so much closer, you know. So it's not nice, you know, it's never nice. I was ill on my first DW. Really, it's rubbish, and it's a question that we need to answer as a community. You know, why were they sick? And they're not alone as well. There's a poll going out on Facebook right now, and a lot of people have answered saying they were very ill over the Easter weekend, having raced down the Thames.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too. And I think it's normal for some crews to have stomach issues during ultra races. You know, you're putting your body through a lot. Some of that, you know, you kind of expect. But the degree of what we saw this year, I also found really surprising. There's, I think, more than 40 comments on this Facebook thread now in the Devizes to Westminster Facebook group about, you know, people getting ill and people who you wouldn't expect to be getting ill too, right? I think Tom and Anoushka didn't really change much with their nutrition from last year, and then they still got ill. Brindy, you know, made a few, you know, there's a couple things that she mentioned that you're like, well, maybe that was it, but nothing obvious to explain the, you know, very severe vomiting incident that she had. I even saw like Scott LeBlanche commented, right? He's done this race before, and he came down with something. So the Thames River pollution, and obviously the pollution that's been happening around the UK. I know other countries deal with this too. The Surfers Against Sewage campaign has been very active. I went back to the interview that Steve Backshall did with the Thames Water guy about a year ago. And when I first saw that, I found it pretty shocking. And I went back and rewatched it. again after seeing this thread happening in the DW Facebook group. And genuinely, Thames Water is there saying our regular effluent is unsafe. And some of these clean water campaigns have found like very, very unsafe levels of E. coli and norovirus in the water. And, you know, my understanding is that norovirus can kick in very quickly. My personal experience backs that up. So it's, you know, it's hard to say.
Yeah, mine too. Yeah.
It's hard to say after the fact exactly what each of these people experienced, but it's pretty scary. And the DW doesn't really need any more factors like this going against it in future years. So I'm hopeful that we'll see some more concrete results in the near future to improve the water quality of the Thames, because this is exactly the opposite of what we all need.
Yeah, I agree.
Was there anything else, you know, especially since we recorded our first debrief on the DW right after the race, anything else that you learned kind of after the fact that stood out or was surprising?
Well, only that we both had a message from Noushie about their start times, and we got that wrong on the DW Debrief podcast. They started bang on time, and they actually had very set start times, and no, they were very strict on that, and they really did want to remain friends after the race.
Yeah, I was surprised because I think, you know, we hear rumors about things beforehand and try to take our best guess at what the actual plan is. But Noushie did confirm that their actual start times were something like 5:27, 5:39, right? Like they were not sort of the 5:15, 5:25 that we expected. So apparently they were right on schedule. Well, I think that's a wrap on our Paddlecast DW coverage for the year. Yeah, what a great year. Can't wait for next year. And there's a bunch of other amazing ultras coming up that I'm looking forward to talking about some more. So thank you to everyone for joining. See you on the water.
See you on the water, everyone.